Group 2, the science dudes.
The answer is infrared radiation.
The science dudes. Group 2, the science dudes.
Science, whoa.
Group 2, the science dudes. Group 2, the science dudes.
Hi there, Group 2 here. Our job today is to make you a master of the electromagnetic spectrum and its applications to global warming. Before we dive into the specifics, we need to know exactly what the electromagnetic spectrum is and what global warming is. First, the electromagnetic spectrum is defined as a range of all wavelengths of radiation. In order from lowest to highest energy, the electromagnetic spectrum consists of radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, visible light, ultraviolet or UV rays, X-rays, and gamma rays. Each of these types of radiation have different types of applications. For example, UV radiation can be used to kill bacteria, and infrared waves can be used in cookers. Also, did you know that mosquitoes use infrared vision to help them fly around and annoy you? One particular part of the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light, is a little more complicated. You see, there's this whole thing called the visible light spectrum, consisting of red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, and violet, in that order. And just a quick tip, just remember ROYGBIV to memorize the order of these colors, which go from lowest energy to highest energy.
Alright, so now you know the fundamentals of the electromagnetic spectrum. But now, let's get into the fun stuff. Each part of the spectrum, each type of radiation, has a specific type of wavelength and frequency. The wavelengths are usually measured in meters, while the frequency is usually measured in hertz. Radio waves have the longest wavelength, while gamma rays have the shortest wavelength. In conjunction to this, radio waves also have the lowest frequency, while gamma rays also have the highest frequency. Thus, radio waves have the lowest energy, while gamma rays have the highest energy. Energy is measured in joules, if you didn't know already. Now that we know the relationships between wavelength, frequency, and energy, we can now dive into how each of these components are calculated. There are three general equations that are used in calculating wavelength, which is a lambda sign, frequency, and energy. By the way, keep the information about the infrared radiation in mind as we move through the video, because you will see how that affects our weather in just a minute.
Before we hop right into the equations, we need to address the two constants using these formulas. The first one is c, the speed of light, which is equal to 3.00 times 10 to the 9th meters per second. The other constant, h, is Planck's constant. This is equal to 6.626 times 10 to the negative 34 joule seconds, and represents the amount of energy a photon can carry in respect to its wave's frequency. The first equation is c, the speed of light, equals wavelength times frequency. If this is rearranged, this equation can be used to solve wavelength if frequency is known, or frequency if wavelength is known. The second equation is lambda sign, wavelength, equals hc over E. This equation can be used to find wavelength, and it can also be used to find energy through isolating the energy variable, which is derived as E equals hc over lambda sign, wavelength. Also, a phenomenon known as the photoelectric effect states that electrons get ejected when light, electromagnetic radiation, hits a metal surface. Look at this animation to see a simplified form of the photoelectric effect on a metal. Did you know photon is another way of saying light? Photons both exhibit properties of particles and waves. Now that we know more about the electromagnetic spectrum, let's talk about its effects on our lives. Primarily global warming.
Global warming, sometimes referred to as climate change, is a term used to describe the dangerous increase in average temperature over time. The causes of global warming are largely due to human activities, such as the burning of fossil fuels. There's a small increase every single year. While this may not look like much, it is. Ice caps are melting, animals are losing their homes, and at this rate, so will humans in due time. Now, you might be wondering, what does the electromagnetic spectrum even have to do with global warming? Well, so you see, all bodies emit energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation. As previously mentioned, The energy that travels to Earth from the Sun in the form of light is indeed a form of electromagnetic radiation. Another common form of electromagnetic radiation is heat. Did you know that the reason we feel heat from a coffee even through a cup is because of electromagnetic radiation? Anyways, the radiation emitted by Earth is known as long-wave radiation, which contains a longer wavelength and less energy than short-wave radiation. Although most of the long-wave radiation emitted by Earth goes towards space, some of it is absorbed by gases in the atmosphere. This added heat by the long-wave radiation warms up the atmosphere. This heat, when it gets trapped in the atmosphere, causes global warming. In other words, infrared radiation, which if you remember is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. This infrared radiation gets trapped in by these greenhouse gases. Then these greenhouse gases start emitting the infrared radiation in all directions once it's trapped in the atmosphere. This means that the more greenhouse gases there are, the more infrared radiation is emitted throughout the globe. This is known as the greenhouse effect. So this is how the electromagnetic spectrum applies to global warming. With this in mind, try to think of ways where we can minimize the infrared radiation trapped on Earth. And maybe, just maybe, you will be able to save the Earth from overheating. Now, let's see what you have learned. Let's pause the video after each question before we reveal the real answer. Do radio waves or UV rays have a higher frequency?
Dun, 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 dun.
The answer is UV rays. What is global warming?
Dun, 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 dun.
Global warming is the term used to describe the dangerous increase in average temperatures over time.
The answer is infrared radiation.
What is the biggest cause of global warming?
Dun, 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 dun.
The answer is human activity. And that's it for the quiz. Thanks for listening. Hope you learned anything new. Credits to Krish Patel, Pranav Ravindran, Shivaji Ganesh, and Yash Anchani for the creation of this amazing video. Citations are available in the description below. Like and subscribe. Remember, save the polar bears.
Group to the science dudes. Group to the science dudes. Group to the science dudes.
Science rule.
Group to the science dudes. Group.